Module 15, Accessing the Funds in Practice. Let's make this concrete. You're sitting in an office in Vientiane or a provincial capital, and you have a genuinely good idea. A climate-resilient irrigation scheme for smallholder farmers who are losing crops to erratic rains. You know the climate science cold. You've seen the need with your own eyes. And somewhere out there is a fund, the Green Climate Fund, the Adaptation Fund, with money meant for exactly this. So why is it so agonizingly hard to get from your good idea to money in the bank? This module is about closing that gap, and it's the most practical one in the course. By the end of it, you'll understand how an organization gets accredited to receive climate funds, the crucial difference between direct and international access, how a proposal travels through the project cycle from first concept to disbursement, and the real reasons proposals fail. Let's start with a hard truth that surprises many newcomers. The big climate funds do not, as a rule, hand money directly to a good idea or even to a good ministry. They hand money to an accredited entity. Accreditation is the process by which a fund examines an organization, top to bottom, and certifies that it is fit to handle the fund's money responsibly. Think of it like a bank vetting you before it will let you manage other people's savings, checking that you have the systems, the controls, the honesty, and the competence to be trusted with large sums. Until an organization is accredited, it simply cannot receive money from a fund like the GCF, no matter how brilliant its projects. The accredited entity is the gatekeeper, and understanding that changes how you approach everything. The fund examines an organization against three broad areas. The first is fiduciary standards, a finance term meaning, essentially, can you be trusted to handle money properly? Do you have proper accounting, procurement rules, audits, and anti-corruption controls, so the money goes where it's supposed to and every dollar can be traced? The second is environmental and social safeguards. Can you make sure your projects don't accidentally harm people or ecosystems, and that affected communities are consulted and protected? And the third is gender. Can you show your projects consider and benefit women, not just men? An organization has to prove itself on all three before it's trusted with the money. Fiduciary, safeguards, gender. Those are the three gates of accreditation. Now here is the distinction that sits at the political heart of this whole system: direct access versus international access. Let me build it carefully, because it matters enormously for a country like yours. In the international access model, the accredited entity is a big global organization, a multilateral development bank, a United Nations agency. The World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the UN Development Program. These entities are already accredited to almost every fund, they have deep experience, and they can move large projects. When your irrigation scheme is funded through one of them, the money flows from the fund to the international entity and then to your project. It works, and it's often the fastest path. But notice what's happening. An outside organization is standing between your country and the money, taking a management role and shaping the project on its terms. The expertise and the control sit abroad. In the direct access model, the accredited entity is a national organization from the developing country itself, a national bank, a ministry, a national environment fund. Once that national entity is accredited, it can receive money from the fund directly, without a foreign intermediary. This was a hard-won reform. The Adaptation Fund pioneered direct access precisely to break the pattern where all climate money had to flow through northern institutions. The Green Climate Fund built country ownership and direct access into its DNA. The promise of direct access is profound. It keeps control, capacity, and decision-making inside the country, so that over time the country builds its own institutions rather than renting someone else's. If direct access is so obviously better for building national capacity, why doesn't every developing country just use it? Why is so much money still flowing through the big international agencies? Because getting a national entity accredited is genuinely hard, and running large projects through it is harder still. The very fiduciary and safeguard standards that protect the money are demanding, and a national environment fund in a least developed country often doesn't yet have the audited accounts, the procurement systems, the safeguard specialists that accreditation requires. So there's a painful catch. You build capacity by managing projects, but you can't manage projects until you already have the capacity. International entities are the shortcut around that catch. They let money flow now. The trap is that the shortcut can become permanent, and the national institution never gets its turn to grow. The mature strategy most serious countries pursue is to use international access to get projects moving today, while deliberately investing in getting a national entity accredited for tomorrow. It's a both-and, not an either-or. That deliberate investment has a name in this world: readiness. The Green Climate Fund and others run readiness programs, relatively small grants whose entire purpose is to help a country get ready to access the bigger money. Readiness money can pay to strengthen a national entity's systems so it can pass accreditation, to help a country write its national climate finance strategy, or to develop a strong pipeline of projects. If you take one practical action from this module, let it be this: find out what readiness support your country is already receiving or could apply for, because it is the on-ramp to everything else, and it is chronically underused. There's a refinement of direct access worth knowing by name, because it's the frontier of this whole debate: enhanced direct access. In the ordinary model, even after a national entity is accredited, the fund's board in Songdo still approves each individual project. Enhanced direct access goes a step further. It devolves the actual funding decisions to the country itself, handing over a block of money and letting a national body decide which local projects to fund, closer to the ground. The promise is faster, more locally attuned decisions, with communities and local governments shaping where the money goes rather than a distant board. It's still relatively rare and carefully piloted, precisely because it demands so much trust and so much local capacity. But it's the direction the most ambitious reformers want to travel, and it's the logical endpoint of the country ownership principle: not just receiving the money directly, but deciding directly how to spend it. Now let's walk the project cycle, the journey a proposal actually takes from idea to money. I'll narrate it as a sequence so you can hear the shape of it. It begins with the concept note. A concept note is a short document, a handful of pages that lays out the idea, the climate problem, the proposed solution, roughly how much money, and why it deserves funding. It's deliberately short because its job is to test the waters before anyone invests months in a full proposal. You submit it, and the fund gives feedback. Is this something we'd consider or not? A good concept note can save you a year of wasted effort on an idea the fund was never going to back. If the concept note gets a warm response, you move to the full funding proposal. This is the heavy document, often 100 pages or more with all its annexes, and building it is a serious undertaking that can take a year or more. It has to make the climate case, the technical case, the financial case, and the safeguards case all at once. It needs a detailed budget, a results framework showing exactly what the project will achieve and how you'll measure it, an economic analysis, a gender assessment, environmental and social studies. This is where most of the real work lives, and where most proposals either become fundable or quietly die. Once the proposal is complete, it goes through the fund's review. Independent technical experts scrutinize it, the fund's secretariat works with you to sharpen it, and finally it goes to the fund's board, the governing body that makes the yes or no decision. Approval by the board is the moment everyone works toward. But approval is not money. After approval come the legal agreements, and then the conditions. The board almost always attaches conditions that must be met before a single dollar moves. Only once those are satisfied does disbursement begin, the actual release of funds, usually in tranches tied to milestones, not all at once. Concept note, full proposal, review, board approval, legal agreements and conditions, then disbursement in stages. That's the cycle, and from first concept to first disbursement can easily take 2 or 3 years. Knowing that timeline in advance is itself a professional skill. It stops you promising communities money that is, realistically, years away. Let me pull out 2 technical ideas that run through the whole cycle and decide many outcomes. The first is co-finance. Funds rarely want to pay for 100% of a project. Co-finance means money brought to the project from other sources, the national government, a development bank, the private sector, alongside the fund's contribution. A fund loves co-finance because it shows the project has serious backing and it stretches the fund's own money further. A proposal that arrives with strong co-finance already lined up is far more attractive than than one asking the fund to carry the entire cost alone. Part of your job in building a proposal is assembling that combination of money, the capital stack, an earlier module described, before you ever submit. One more thing about co-finance that trips people up: it doesn't all have to be cash. Co-finance can be in kind, the value of government staff time, land contributed to the project, existing infrastructure it builds on. A finance minister might not be able to hand over dollars, but the value of the extension officers who will run your irrigation training or the public land the scheme sits on can often be counted. Learning to assemble and document co-finance from these different sources, some cash, some in kind, some concessional, some grant, is one of the genuinely creative parts of the craft, and it's where your knowledge of what's actually happening on the ground in your country becomes a financial asset on paper. The second idea is MRV, monitoring, reporting, and verification. This is the machinery that proves a project actually delivered what it promised. Monitoring is tracking your results as you go. Reporting is telling the fund about them on a schedule. Verification is having those results independently checked so they're not just your word. Funds care intensely about MRV because their own credibility depends on being able to show that their money produced real climate results. A proposal with a vague, hand-waving plan for measuring results signals to a reviewer that you either don't know how you'll prove impact or you're hoping no one will check. A crisp MRV plan signals a serious operator. In climate finance, if you can't measure it, in the fund's eyes it didn't happen. I keep hearing that most climate proposals fail. If I do all this correctly, what actually kills a proposal at the review stage? What are the reviewers really looking for? Proposals fail for a handful of recurring reasons, and once you know them, you can inoculate against them. The first and biggest is a weak climate rationale. The project is a nice development project painted green, without a clear, evidence-based explanation of how climate change causes this problem and how this intervention addresses it. Funds are climate funds. They reject anything that would have been a good idea even in a world without climate change. The second is a shaky theory of change. The logical chain from your activities to your results doesn't hold together, or the results can't actually be measured. The third is weak financials. The budget doesn't add up, the co-finance isn't real, or the project can't sustain itself once the fund's money runs out. The fourth is neglected safeguards or gender, treated as an afterthought bolted on at the end rather than built in. And the fifth, quietly fatal, is a lack of country ownership. The government isn't genuinely behind it, or worse, doesn't know about it. Fix those 5 and you're ahead of the great majority of proposals a fund ever sees. Weak climate case, weak logic, weak money, weak safeguards, weak ownership. That's the graveyard, and every grave is avoidable. A quick, practical note on scale, because not every good idea needs to run this full gauntlet. The big funds know that a 2 or 3 year cycle and a 100-page proposal make no sense for a small project, so several of them run simplified or small grant windows, lighter approval processes for projects below a certain size, with shorter documents and faster decisions. If your irrigation scheme is modest, look for these streamlined tracks before you commit to the full heavy process. Matching the size of the process to the size of the project is a mark of an experienced practitioner. Similarly, a lot of the most valuable early money isn't project money at all, it's project preparation funding. Small grants specifically to help you develop a strong proposal, run the feasibility studies, and do the community consultations. Many strong ideas die not because they were bad, but because no one funded the work of turning them into a fundable proposal. Knowing that preparation funding exists and going after it first can be the difference between an idea and a project. There's a piece of hard-won wisdom underneath all this that I want to name plainly. The complexity you're wrestling with is not a sign that you're doing it wrong. It's genuinely, structurally hard, deliberately so, because the money comes with real accountability. But that complexity falls unequally. A wealthy country with a large, expert civil service can absorb it. A small climate ministry in a least developed country, with a handful of overstretched staff, cannot easily produce a 100-page proposal with a full economic analysis and a gender study. That asymmetry, where the countries with the least capacity face the highest barriers to the money they most need, is one of the central injustices of this system, and it's precisely the injustice the reformers in our final module are trying to fix. Your fluency in this machinery is, in a real sense, an act of leveling the field. So, to bring it together, the big funds give money to accredited entities, not directly to ideas, and accreditation tests an organization on fiduciary standards, safeguards, and gender. International access flows money through global agencies quickly, but keeps control abroad. Direct access flows it through national entities and builds lasting local capacity, and the mature strategy uses both while investing in readiness to grow your own institutions. The project cycle runs from concept note to full proposal to board approval to disbursement over 2 or 3 years, powered throughout by co-finance and by a credible MRV plan. And proposals fail for 5 recurring, fixable reasons: a weak climate case, weak logic, weak money, weak safeguards, and weak country ownership. We've now traveled from what climate finance is, through its architecture and instruments and themes, all the way to the practical craft of landing the money. In the final module, we step back and ask the harder questions: is any of this actually working? Is it fair? And what should you, as a practitioner, be watching as the whole system tries to reform itself? Let's finish the course.